Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. Henry Carter's fingers traced across the credit card statements scattered on his mahogany desk. Each digit represented another betrayal. $50,000 in unauthorized charges stared back at him, mocking his carefully constructed world of control and power. He leaned back in his leather chair, mind already calculating possible moves and countermoves. The other documents laid out before him told an even more damning story. Drained joint accounts, liquidated investment portfolios, and the transfer documentation for their Stratford Coast vacation home, now solely in his wife's name. The phone on his desk buzzed. "Mr. Carter, the board meeting starts in 15 minutes. His assistant Paula's voice came through the speaker. "Cancel it," Henry replied, his tone carrying the same measured control he'd maintained throughout his rise from Fenway Streets to East Bridges Towers. "Clear my schedule for the rest of the day." "Sir, the McAllister merger can wait." He cut her off, then added, "And Paula, pull everything we have on Victor Hall. Tax records, business licenses, client lists, everything." "The personal trainer." "Yes." Henry's gray-green eyes narrowed as he pulled up the security footage from their home gym on his laptop. There it was, Linda's sessions with Victor, always running 15 minutes over. The lingering touches, the private jokes. The intercom clicked off, and Henry returned to analyzing the financial records. Each transaction told its own story of betrayal. Linda had planned this meticulously. He had to give her that. Small withdrawals at first, testing the waters, then larger ones, timed to coincide with their normal household expenses. The Stratford Coast house transfer buried under routine paperwork he trusted her to handle. A soft knock at his office door interrupted his thoughts. "Dad?" Andrew stood in the doorway. 16 years old, but carrying himself with the composure of someone much older. Henry saw his own sharp features reflected in his son's face, though Andrew had inherited Linda's golden hair. But those eyes, those were pure Carter, gray-green and calculating. "Come in," Henry said, watching as his son approached the desk. Andrew's gaze swept over the scattered documents, taking in the information with practiced efficiency. "Mom's been busy," Andrew observed, picking up one of the credit card statements. "These charges are all from places she never go, high-end hotels, restaurants we've never heard of." Henry raised an eyebrow. "You've been watching." "Since the day I saw her delete texts before putting her phone down at dinner." Andrew's voice carried no emotion, just cold observation. "She's not as careful as she thinks she is." "And you didn't tell me." Andrew met his father's gaze. "I needed proof first. Numbers don't lie." He paused, then added, "Don't stress, Dad. I already handled Mom's problem." The words hung in the air between them. Henry studied his son's face, seeing not the child Linda had tried to coddle, but a reflection of himself at that age. Someone who understood that power came from knowledge and control. "Tell me," Henry commanded softly. Andrew pulled out his laptop from his messenger bag. "Remember when you gave me access to the home network for my coding projects?" His fingers flew across the keyboard. "I set up a few extra security measures, keyloggers, email monitoring, phone backups." The screen filled with rows of data, text messages, emails, location records. "Mom's been meeting him for 6 months, usually at the Harborview Hotel, room 1504, always booked under different names, paid in cash." But the interesting part, Andrew clicked through to another screen. "Victor Hall has a pattern." Henry leaned forward, a predatory gleam in his eyes as his son laid out the evidence. Victor Hall wasn't just a trainer targeting a wealthy client. He was a professional, having pulled the same scheme 3 times before. Nicole Turner, Helen Ross, Sandra Briggs, Andrew read off the screen. All former clients, all divorced their husbands within a year of starting training with him. All lost everything in the settlements. "How did you get this?" "The same way Mom's about to lose access to her accounts," Andrew replied with a small shrug. "People really should use better passwords, especially divorce lawyers." Henry felt a surge of pride cut through his anger. He'd always known Andrew was sharp, but this was something else. While he'd been focused on building his empire at Evergreen Securities, his son had been developing his own skills in the digital realm. The Stratford Coast house transfer, Henry mused. Can it be traced? Already on it. Andrew pulled up another window. The documentation looks clean. But the timing is interesting. Mom started the paperwork right after Victor's last divorce case was settled. I'm guessing he advised her on how to do it. Henry stood and walked to the bar cart in the corner of his office. He poured 2 glasses of water, one for himself, one for his son. It was a gesture that spoke volumes. Andrew had earned his place at the table. We need to be careful, Henry said, handing Andrew a glass. Your mother won't expect us to move this quickly. That gives us an advantage. She's meeting him tonight, Andrew offered. I tracked the reservation. Different hotel this time. Want me to send an anonymous tip to the press? Henry shook his head. No, the press is too unpredictable. We need to control every aspect of this. He took a sip of water, mind working through scenarios. Tell me more about these others, the ones before your mother. Andrew pulled up detailed profiles on each of Victor's previous marks. Nicole Turner, the socialite whose art collection vanished during her divorce. Helen Ross, who lost custody of her children after anonymous evidence of substance abuse emerged. Sandra Briggs, whose family business collapsed under an investigation shortly after she left her husband. He's good, Andrew admitted. Never leaves a paper trail connecting him directly. Always has an alibi. The wives take the fall while he walks away clean. Henry's lips curved into a cold smile. But he's never dealt with someone like us before. He turned to his son. You said you handled Mom's problem. What exactly did you do? Created a backdoor into her accounts 2 months ago, when I first suspected something. Tonight, while she's with him, all her credit cards will hit their limits with charges she never made. The Stratford Coast house transfer will trigger fraud alerts, and every penny she's hidden away will simply vanish. And if she tries to access her emergency accounts. Andrew's smile mirrored his father's. What emergency accounts? Henry walked back to his desk, pride warring with a deeper, darker emotion. His son had not only discovered the betrayal, but had already set in motion plans to destroy the betrayer. Like father, like son indeed. Dad. Andrew's voice carried a note of uncertainty for the first time. Are you angry I didn't tell you sooner? Henry looked at his son, really looked at him. Gone was the little boy who used to beg for bedtime stories. In his place sat a young man who understood the most important lesson Henry had learned on Fenway streets. Power belongs to those willing to take it. No, Henry answered honestly. You did exactly what I would have done. Gathered intelligence, secured evidence, and prepared countermeasures before showing your hand. He gestured to the laptop. The only question now is, how far are you willing to go? Andrew closed the laptop with deliberate slowness. She betrayed us both, Dad. She betrayed our family. His gray-green eyes hardened. I say we show her exactly what that means. Henry nodded, decision made. Then let's make sure that when we're done, neither of them will ever recover. He picked up his phone. I'm going to make some calls. I want you to compile everything you have on Victor's previous victims, especially their ex-husbands. It's time to build our army. As Andrew packed up his laptop, Henry found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about his son. Linda had always criticized his parenting style, claiming he was too harsh, too demanding. But she had never understood that he wasn't raising a child. He was forging a successor. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Linda's name flashed on the screen. Henry let it go to voicemail, imagining her panic when her card started declining. Soon, she would discover her accounts frozen, her safety nets gone, and that would be just the beginning. Dad, Andrew paused at the door. Remember when you told me that in business, there's no room for mercy? Henry nodded. I think I finally understand what you meant. As his son left the office, Henry turned to the window overlooking Eastbridge. Somewhere out there, his wife was plotting her escape with a man who had destroyed other families for profit. They thought they were the hunters. They were about to learn what it meant to be prey. The south end of Fenway hadn't changed much in 30 years. Henry Carter stood outside his old apartment building, the brick facade more weathered but still standing. He'd driven here straight from the airport, needing to remind himself of where he came from and why he'd fought so hard to leave it behind. The smell of cheap beer and cigarettes wafted from McKinney's bar across the street, where his father had drunk away their rent money more times than he could count. The old man's words echoed in his memory. "The world ain't fair, boy. Either accept being a victim or learn to be the predator." His phone vibrated. A text from Andrew. "Mom tried to access the Marble Keys account. Blocked." Henry smiled. Of course, Linda would go for the offshore accounts first. She'd watched him build his empire at Evergreen Securities, had played the perfect corporate wife at every charity gala and board dinner. She thought she knew all his secrets. The phone rang. Martin Green's name appeared on the screen. "Tell me you have something," Henry answered. "Better than something," Martin's gravelly voice replied. "I've got everything. Your boy's research was solid, but my contacts filled in the gaps. Victor Hall isn't just running romance scams. He's got connections to some heavy hitters in Bay City, gambling debts, among other things. He's been photographed with Theo Vigil's crew. Word is he owes them serious money." Henry absorbed this information. Theo Vigil controlled most of the loan sharking operations on the East Coast. Having that kind of leverage could be useful. "There's more," Martin continued. "Remember Meredith Hall, Victor's ex-wife? The one before he started targeting wealthy women. Yeah, she's working as a waitress in West Side now. But here's the interesting part. She's been trying to get someone to look into Victor for years. Claims he's got a storage unit full of evidence he uses to blackmail his victims if they ever threaten to expose him." Henry's mind raced with possibilities. "Send me everything you have on Meredith. And Martin. I want that storage unit found. Already on it. Oh, and Henry. Harriet Nelson's been asking about you. Says she's got ideas about handling the Stratford Coast House situation." The mention of Harriet brought back memories of his early days in Eastbridge. She'd been the first person to give him a real shot, hiring him as a junior analyst when his Fenway accent still marked him as an outsider. Now she was senior partner at Nelson & Gray, one of the city's top law firms. "I'll call her," Henry promised, ending the call. He walked down the street, past the corner store where he'd worked after school to help pay bills. The owner, Mr. Chun, had taught him his first lessons about business and about keeping secrets for the right price. Another text from Andrew. "Found something interesting in Mom's email. She's been sending documents to a lawyer in the Marble Keys. Want me to intercept?" Henry typed back. "Forward everything to Harriet Nelson first, then kill the email account." He reached McKinney's bar and pushed open the heavy door. The interior was dark, smoky, unchanged since his father's days. A few old-timers looked up as he entered, not recognizing the expensive suit and carefully cultivated Eastbridge polish. "Bobby Carter," a voice called from behind the bar. "Never thought I'd see you back here." Mike McKinney had aged, his red hair now gray, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. He'd been the one to find Henry's father that last night, passed out in the alley behind the bar. "Need information, Mike," Henry said, sliding onto a bar stool, "about the old days, specifically about how certain problems used to get solved." Mike's eyes narrowed. "Those days are past, Bobby. You got out, made something of yourself. Someone's trying to take it all away." Henry's voice was soft, dangerous. "Someone who thinks they know how to play the game better than me." Understanding dawned in Mike's eyes. He reached under the bar and pulled out a bottle of the good stuff, not the watered-down whiskey served to regular customers. "Your father, God rest his soul, was a mean drunk," Mike said, pouring 2 glasses. "But he knew people who could make problems disappear, people who still owe me favors." Henry took a sip, letting the familiar burn ground him. "I need names, Mike, and I need them to be discreet." His phone buzzed again. An email from Harriet Nelson. "Documents received. This is exactly what we needed. Meet me tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring your son." Mike wrote something on a napkin and slid it across the bar. "These guys operate out of Greenwood now. Tell 'em Mickey sent you." "But Bobby." He leaned in close. "Whatever you're planning, remember, there's no coming back from some things." Henry pocketed the napkin and stood, leaving several $100 bills on the bar. "I passed the point of no return the moment they betrayed my family." Outside, the street had grown darker, but Henry's path was clear. He built himself up from nothing once before. He could do it again. But this time, he wouldn't just survive. He would destroy anyone who dared to threaten what was his. His phone rang again. This time, it was Paula. "Sir, Mrs. Carter is in the office. She's demanding to see you." Henry checked his watch. Right on schedule. The credit card declines would have started an hour ago. "Tell her I'm out of the country on business." And Paula, "Record everything," she says. He could almost hear his assistant smile. "Already am, sir." Henry hailed a cab, directing it to Fenway International. As the streets rolled past, he thought about the people who had underestimated him over the years. The prep school kids who mocked his accent, the Wall Street executives who dismissed him as nouveau riche. Each one had learned their lesson. Now it was Linda's turn. She and Victor thought they had orchestrated the perfect escape plan. They were about to discover they'd started a war they couldn't win. His phone lit up with another text from Andrew. "Mom's getting desperate. She tried to transfer the Stratford Coast house again. The bank flagged it for fraud investigation." "Good," Henry replied. "Keep monitoring. And son, remember, no mercy." The cab pulled up to the airport terminal. Henry straightened his tie, checking his reflection in the window. The South End Street kid was hidden beneath perfect tailoring and practiced sophistication, but he was still there, waiting for the moment to strike. Time to go hunting. In the penthouse suite at the Harborview Hotel, Victor Hall paced the luxurious space, phone pressed to his ear, listening to Linda Carter's increasingly hysterical voice. "Everything's gone, Victor. The accounts, the credit cards, even the Stratford Coast house is frozen. How is this possible?" Victor ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, mind racing. He'd done this before, guiding wealthy women through messy divorces while keeping his own hands clean. But something felt different this time. "Linda, sweetheart, calm down," he soothed, years of practice making his voice warm and reassuring. "This is just a temporary setback. Your husband's trying to scare you. You don't understand." Linda's voice cracked. "Henry doesn't do anything temporarily. And there's something else. He knows about the others, Victor, about Nicole and Helen and Sandra." Victor froze. Those names were buried deep, protected by careful planning and ironclad NDAs. Even his lawyer didn't have records connecting all three cases. "That's impossible," he said, but uncertainty crept in. "He even knows about the storage unit in West Side," Linda whispered. "Michael, I'm scared. Henry's not like the others. He's different." Victor walked to the bar and poured himself a scotch, trying to steady his nerves. "Different how?" "You don't understand what he's capable of," Linda said, her voice tight. "The things he's done to build his company. And Andrew. He's just like his father, maybe worse. He's not just a teenager, Victor. He's Henry's heir in every way that matters." The line went dead. Victor tried calling back, but Linda's phone was disconnected. He pulled up his laptop, checking his own accounts. Everything looked normal, but something nagged at him. He'd been careful, always operating through proxies and shell companies. If Henry Carter had somehow traced his previous divorces, his phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Storage Unit 247, Westside Self-Storage. Ring any bells?" Victor's hands shook as he typed. "Who is this?" The response came instantly. asked Linda about her son's coding hobby. Realization hit him like a physical blow. He'd assumed Andrew was just another privileged rich kid. If he had managed to hack into his files. A knock at the suite door interrupted his thoughts. Victor tensed, then relaxed as he remembered ordering room service. But when he opened the door, the hallway was empty, except for a manila envelope. Inside was a single photograph. Victor leaving Nicole Turner's house 3 years ago, on the night before her divorce settlement. He had told that story differently in court. His phone lit up again, texts flooding in. Nicole, Helen, Sandra, their ex-husbands, even Meredith, his own ex-wife. All had received evidence he'd worked years to bury. In his panic, Victor almost missed the email from his accountant. His offshore accounts, the ones where he'd stashed his consulting fees, were empty, erased as if they'd never existed. "Still think we should be worried about Henry," a voice said. Victor spun around. Andrew Carter stood in the doorway connecting to the suite's second bedroom, laptop under his arm. The boy's gray-green eyes held the same predatory gleam Victor had seen in Henry's. "How did you get in here?" Victor demanded. Andrew's smile was cold. "I've had access to your accounts for months, including your hotel reservations." He gestured to the laptop. "Amazing what you can do with the right passwords." "What do you want?" Victor tried to keep his voice steady. "What I want." Andrew laughed. A chilling sound from someone so young. "This isn't about what I want. It's about consequences. You and Mom thought you could destroy our family. Now you get to watch your whole life fall apart." Victor lunged for the boy, but Andrew was already gone, the door clicking shut behind him. On the coffee table, his phone lit up with a new message, this time from Henry Carter himself. "Thank you for taking such good care of my wife. Now let me return the favor." At 3 a.m., Linda's hysterical call came exactly as Andrew had predicted. Henry sat in his home office, listening to his wife's panic with cold satisfaction. Each accusation, each demand, was a testament to how completely their plan had worked. "What did you do?" she screamed. "All my accounts are frozen. The Stratford Coast house is being investigated for fraud. Even my personal credit cards are maxed out with charges I never made." "I haven't done anything, Linda," Henry replied calmly. "Maybe you should ask your boyfriend Victor about his other clients, specifically Nicole Turner, Helen Ross, and Sandra Briggs. Sound familiar?" The sharp intake of breath told him everything he needed to know. "How did you?" "I'm not the one you should be worried about," Henry cut her off. "Our son seems to have inherited my talent for research, and unlike me, he grew up in the digital age. Amazing what teenagers can do with computers these days." "Andrew." Linda's voice cracked. "What have you done to our son?" "I didn't do anything to him. I just taught him the most important lesson. Family is everything. And those who betray family." Henry let the silence stretch. "Well, you're about to find out what happens to them." "You can't do this. I'll go to the police. The FBI." "With what evidence?" Henry's voice remained eerily calm. "Every transaction was legal, every document properly filed. Even the charges on your credit cards match your usual spending patterns. And as for Victor's past, I'm sure his other victims would love to testify about his pattern of seducing wealthy women." "This isn't over," Linda hissed. "You're right," Henry said. "It's just beginning." He ended the call and turned to Andrew, who had been silently monitoring his laptop throughout the conversation. "Status. Everything's in place," Andrew reported. "Victor's previous victims have all received their evidence packages. His training contracts are being terminated across the city, and that storage unit in West Side. A few very motivated ex-husbands are emptying it as we speak." Henry studied his son's face, the focused expression, the calculated precision of his movements. Linda had accused him of corrupting their child, but she'd never understood. He hadn't corrupted Andrew. He prepared him for the real world, a world where power belonged to those strong enough to take it and keep it. "You understand there's no going back." Henry asked. Your mother won't forgive this. Andrew closed his laptop, his gray-green eyes hard. She lost the right to forgiveness when she chose him over us. Father and son shared a look of perfect understanding. The war was just beginning, but the first battle was already won. Linda and Victor had thought themselves clever, playing their games of seduction and betrayal. They were about to learn what real power looked like. The Carter men weren't just wealthy. They were predators. And the hunt had only just begun. Paula's heels clicked against the marble floor of Evergreen Securities as she strode toward Henry Carter's office. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the 48th floor, but her expression remained grim. After 12 years as his executive assistant, now a chief operations officer, she knew the difference between routine problems and genuine threats. This was the latter. She entered without knocking, one of the few people permitted such privilege. The SEC is launching an investigation into Evergreen Securities, she announced, placing a thick folder on his desk. Anonymous tip about insider trading and client fund misappropriation. Henry didn't look up from his computer screen. Source: Initial trace leads to the office of Deputy Director James Harrison, Paula said. The same Harrison whose wife was friends with Nicole Turner, Victor's first victim. Henry finally met her gaze. How convenient. They're sending a team tomorrow morning. Full audit going back 5 years. Henry stood and walked to his private bar, pouring 2 glasses of water. He handed one to Paula, a gesture she recognized from years of witnessing his strategic planning sessions. Call Harriet Nelson, he instructed. Tell her it's time to use the Harrison file. Paula raised an eyebrow. The offshore accounts. No, the tech company bribes. Henry's eyes glinted. The ones he buried last year in exchange for certain favors, records sealed by court order. Jason found them anyway. Henry activated his secure phone line. Get Martin Green on the line. I'd want surveillance on Harrison starting now. Paula pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. What about the SEC team? Let them come. By tomorrow morning, Harrison will be too busy defending himself to remember he ever heard of Evergreen Securities. The intercom buzzed. Sir, the security chief's voice said. Mrs. Carter is in the lobby. She's demanding to see you. Henry checked the security feed on his monitor. Linda stood at the reception desk, her usual polish cracking around the edges. The designer outfit couldn't hide the tension in her shoulders or the desperate gleam in her eyes. Have her escorted out, he commanded, and revoke her building access. Already done, sir. Paula watched the feed as security approached Linda. She's not alone, she observed. Black SUV waiting outside. Driver matches Victor Hall's description. Send the footage to Andrew, Henry ordered. I want to know everywhere that vehicle has been for the last week. His phone lit up with a text from Martin. Harrison took a meeting at the Harborview last night. Same floor as Hall's usual suite. Henry's expression hardened. They're coordinating their moves. Sloppy. He turned to Paula. How much does the staff know? Only what they need to, Paula said. The official story is that Mrs. Carter is taking a sabbatical to focus on her charity work. Paula's tone turned cold. Though the security team remembers how she treated them over the years, they're not exactly sympathetic. Good. Keep it that way. Henry pulled up his private email. I'm sending you documents from Meredith Hall. Bank records showing unusual deposits to Harrison's wife's account, dated right after Nicole Turner's divorce settlement. Paula scanned the records on her tablet. These could destroy his career. That's the point, Henry said. His phone buzzed. Another text from Andrew. Mom's lawyer met with Harrison again. Same restaurant as Victor's sister. They're consolidating their forces. They're getting sloppy, Paula observed. Speaking of sloppy, Henry brought up another window. Someone just filed a complaint with social services, allegations of abuse concerning Andrew. Paula saw Henry's hands tighten on the desk. Source: new employee in their system, started last week. Man looks a lot like Victor's sister. Amateur move, Henry scoffed. Andrew already on it. Dad? Andrew's voice came through the speaker. Remember Monica Walsh from my chemistry class? Her mom works for social services. I helped Monica pass AP Chem last semester. Handle it, Henry commanded. Consider it done. Paula pulled up another window on her tablet. Harrison's wife just posted on social media. A private yacht club dinner tonight. Guest list includes 3 board members from firms we're acquiring next month. They're trying to turn our partners against us, Henry said, voice holding grudging respect. Creative, but futile. He pressed the intercom. Get me Nelson and Gray. It's time to accelerate the McAllister merger. As Paula moved to comply, Henry's private line rang. The caller ID showed a number he hadn't seen in years. South End of Fenway area code. Mickey McGinney's dead. The gruff voice announced without preamble. Found him behind his bar an hour ago. Heart attack, they're saying. Henry's expression didn't change, but Paula saw him reach for his father's old lighter, a tell he had when genuinely angry. Natural causes. About as natural as your father's were. The voice turned bitter. Word is some guys from Greenwood were asking questions about you last week. Mickey might have said the wrong thing to the wrong people. I see. Henry's tone could have frozen fire. Thank you for letting me know. He ended the call and turned to Paula. Find out who's running Greenwood these days and get Andrew. We need to accelerate our timeline. Paula nodded, already typing. What about Linda's social circle? The Stratford Coast crowd. Send them the charity audit, Henry ordered. Anonymous tip, untraceable source. All of it. Paula moved to execute his orders, reflecting on the 12 years she'd spent watching Henry Carter build his empire. She'd seen him destroy competitors, absorb rival firms, and turn enemies into allies. But this was different. This was personal, and Henry Carter took everything personally. The intercom buzzed one final time. Sir, his security chief sounded worried. We just got word. Your car's brake lines were cut. Henry's laugh held no humor. How many cameras cover the garage? 4 on that level alone. Good. Send the footage to Andrew. Let's see who's getting desperate. Paula pulled up the garage security feeds, scanning for any sign of tampering. The image quality was excellent. Another of Andrew's upgrades. Even in the dim lighting, they could make out a figure in maintenance coveralls working on Henry's car at 3 a.m. Frame by frame, Henry ordered. There. Paula enhanced the image. The face was partially hidden, but the build was familiar. Victor's sister, she confirmed. Same woman who filed the social services complaint. Sloppy, Henry repeated. They're making mistakes. He turned to his computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. Time to make them pay for those mistakes. The morning sun climbed higher over Eastbridge as Henry Carter and his loyal lieutenant continued their work, each move and countermove carefully calculated. Outside his office, Evergreen Securities operated as usual. Trades executed, deals brokered, fortunes made and lost. But in that corner office, a different kind of transaction took place. The currency wasn't money but power, and Henry Carter had spent a lifetime learning how to accumulate and wield it. The war had begun in earnest, and he intended to win. Martin Green's office in Fenway's financial district didn't match his reputation. The furniture was plain, the decor minimal, but the security systems hidden behind the walls rivaled military installations. 20 years running the city's most successful private investigation firm had taught him the value of discretion. Victor Hall isn't just running romance scams, Martin reported, sliding photos across his desk to Henry. Look at who he's been meeting in Bay City. Henry examined the images. Victor at high-stakes poker tables, surrounded by men whose faces Martin had helpfully identified in the margins. Theo Vigil's crew, the East Coast's top loan sharks and money launderers. How much does he owe them? Henry asked. North of $2 million, Martin said, pulling up more files on his secure terminal. He's been borrowing to cover losses from his previous divorces. Seems not all his marks were as wealthy as they appeared. Henry's gray-green eyes narrowed. And Linda? She doesn't know about the gambling. Martin typed a command, bringing up surveillance photos. But she's been meeting with lawyers, corporate specialists, tax experts. She's planning something bigger. Show me. Martin's fingers flew across the keyboard. Documents filled the screen. Shell companies, offshore accounts, complex financial structures. She's trying to attack Evergreen Securities directly, using everything she learned watching you build it. Amateur. Henry's voice held cold amusement. She never understood the difference between seeing something and knowing how it works. There's more. Martin hesitated. Meredith Hall reached out. Says she wants to help. Victor's ex-wife. Henry leaned forward. Why? Revenge. Martin brought up Meredith's file. Victor left her bankrupt 5 years ago. She's been gathering evidence ever since, waiting for someone with the resources to use it. What kind of evidence? He's got a storage unit in Westside. Martin quoted from his notes. Keeps trophies from all his cons. Recordings, photos, documents. Everything he needs to blackmail the women if they ever wise up. Location. Better than that. Martin smiled grimly. I've got the key codes. Meredith made copies before the divorce, just in case. Henry studied Meredith's photo. Once a successful real estate agent, now waiting tables in Westside. Her fall from grace mirrored the pattern Victor perfected with his wealthy victims. Send them to me, Henry said. And keep Meredith safe. We'll need her testimony. What about Linda? Martin asked. She's losing her social circle by the hour, Henry replied. Thanks to Andrew's digital warfare, everyone now sees her for the fraud she is. Martin nodded. Speaking of old friends, Harriet Nelson is finalizing the files to clear your name with the SEC. And we've leaked certain documents about Harrison's corruption to the press. He won't last the week. Henry stood, straightening his tie. Good. This time, we don't just beat them. We destroy them. Completely. Linda Carter's social circle began crumbling on a Wednesday afternoon. She sat in her usual chair at the Stratford Coast Beach Club's monthly charity committee meeting, watching as her carefully constructed world imploded. These financial records, Victoria Sheffield, committee chair and self-appointed queen of Stratford society, tapped the manila envelope on the table. They proved that charitable donations were being redirected. That's ridiculous. Linda protested, but her voice lacked conviction. She knew exactly what those records would show. Years of creative accounting disguised as administrative costs. The Cancer Research Fund, another committee member read from the documents. Only 30% actually reached the hospitals. The rest vanished into offshore accounts. And the Children's Education Initiative, Victoria continued, voice-tripping disdain. Apparently it pays for quite a few personal training sessions at exclusive gyms. Linda's phone buzzed. A text from Victor. Everything's falling apart. My clients are canceling. Someone sent them proof of everything. She excused herself from the meeting, hurrying to the club's powder room. Her hand shook as she dialed Victor's number. They had videos, he said without preamble. From the storage unit, everything I saved to protect us. They found it all. How? Linda asked in horror. Meredith, Victor's voice cracked. My ex-wife. She must have kept copies of the keys. Linda, I'm scared. Theo Vigil's people are looking for me. They say I owe them $2 million. We'll figure something out, she promised. But the words rang hollow. Her phone chimed with an email. The sender was anonymous, but the attached photos made her blood run cold. Victor with Nicole Turner, with Helen Ross, with Sandra Briggs, each image dated and time-stamped, proving the pattern of seduction and betrayal. Linda. Victoria's voice came through the powder room door. The board would like to speak with you about the missing funds. Linda looked in the mirror, seeing her perfect facade begin to crack. Henry had warned her once, years ago. In this world, you're either the predator or the prey. She'd thought herself clever, using his lessons against him. Now she understood she'd never been the predator. She'd just been prey that didn't know it yet. Her phone buzzed again, this time her lawyer. His SEC investigation dropped. Deputy Director Harrison resigned this morning. Something about offshore bribes. Your accounts are still frozen. The Stratford Coast house transfer has been flagged for criminal investigation. I can't help you anymore. Linda started to reply, but her phone screen suddenly filled with data. Her own offshore accounts, emails to Victor, plans for destroying Evergreen Securities. All the evidence she'd thought safely hidden. A final message appeared. Mom, you taught me to always have a backup plan. I learned from the best. Andrew. She sank onto the powder room couch, her designer outfit suddenly feeling like a costume. Outside, she could hear Victoria reading more damning evidence to the committee. Her phone continued buzzing with cancellations, party invitations rescinded, charity board positions regretfully terminated, social connections severed. In his Evergreen Securities office, Henry Carter watched the destruction unfold on multiple screens. Security feeds showed Linda leaving the beach club, her usual confidence shattered. Financial trackers displayed Victor's assets disappearing one by one. News alerts reported Harrison's resignation amid scandal. Andrew sat at the conference table, orchestrating their digital warfare with the same precision his father brought to corporate raids. Mom's lawyer just withdrew from the case, Andrew reported. Seems someone sent his firm proof that she was planning to implicate them in financial fraud. Henry nodded in approval. And Victor. Theo Vigil's people found him at the Harborview. They're having a discussion about his gambling debts. Father and son shared a look of perfect understanding. The war wasn't over, but victory was in sight. Their enemies had played at power, thinking wealth and social status made them untouchable. They were about to learn the difference between playing at power and truly wielding it. The Carters had been born predators, and the hunt had only just begun. The Bay City Police found Victor Hall's body at 4:37 a.m. in Suite 1504 of the Ocean View Casino Hotel. Detective Emily Green stood in the doorway, taking in the scene with practiced detachment. Preliminary cause of death, she asked the medical examiner, Dr. Liu. Blunt force trauma, Dr. Liu replied, pointing to the wounds. Multiple attackers, based on the angle of strikes. Made to look like a typical mob hit. Green examined the room. No signs of forced entry. 2 glasses on the bar, one with lipstick traces. The wall safe stood open and empty. Time of death. Between midnight and 2 a.m. hotel security cameras went dark during that window. Routine maintenance, supposedly. Green's phone buzzed. The victim's background check had come in. Former Olympic swimmer turned personal trainer, suspected connections to multiple fraud schemes, links to organized crime. Theo Vigil's crew. She asked her partner, who had just arrived. Word is Hall owed them big money. Her partner said, over $2 million. Convenient. Green picked up a manila envelope from the desk. Inside were photographs of Victor with various wealthy women, including his most recent companion, Linda Carter. Mrs. Carter's statement, she asked, claimed she was with friends at the Stratford Coast Beach Club until midnight. Multiple witnesses confirm it. Green nodded toward the laptop on the desk. Tech team find anything? That's the interesting part. Her partner lowered his voice. The laptop's clean. Too clean, like it was professionally wiped. But we found this in the printer memory. He handed her a document. Green scanned it quickly. Offshore account numbers, transfer records, detailed plans for blackmailing wealthy women. He kept records, she observed. Not just records. Insurance. Her partner pointed to a name on the document. See who signed off on these transfers. Harrison, the deputy director who just resigned. Green's phone buzzed again. Speaking of Harrison, his wife just came forward. Says Hall blackmailed them with photos from his training sessions. How many others? At least 3 confirmed cases. Nicole Turner, Helen Ross, Sandra Briggs, all followed the same pattern. Seduction, divorce, financial ruin. The scene started coming together in Green's mind. Victor Hall wasn't just a con man. He was a predator who had finally chosen the wrong prey. Her phone rang. The chief of detectives. "Green, we're shutting down the investigation." "Sir." "Theo Vigil's crew just claimed responsibility. Gambling debts, a warning to others who don't pay. Case closed." Green looked at the evidence spread before her. A too-clean crime scene, a conveniently timed camera outage, perfectly preserved documentation of Hall's crimes. "And Henry Carter?" she asked. "What about him?" His wife was Hall's latest mark. His company was targeted by the SEC right after Harrison met with Hall. Seems relevant. "Not anymore." The chief's tone offered no argument. "Carter's got friends in the department. High up. This goes down as a mob hit, clean and simple." Green ended the call, studying the crime scene one last time. Everything pointed to organized crime, exactly as someone wanted it to appear. In her 15 years on the force, she'd learned to recognize when certain doors were meant to stay closed. This was one of them. Her partner gathered the evidence bags. "Heading to the lab." "No." Green removed her gloves. "This one's done." Sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom. Across town, Linda Carter sat in Harriet Nelson's office, staring at the morning newspapers. Victor's death dominated the headlines, each story highlighting his criminal connections. "I want to make a deal," she said, hands shaking as she signed the preliminary divorce papers. "I'll return everything." Harriet's expression remained professionally neutral. "Everything isn't enough anymore." She slid another document across the desk. "Henry's countersuit for damages exceeds the value of all assets in your name. However, he's willing to be reasonable, provided you agree to certain terms." "What terms?" "Full confession of your role in the charity fraud, detailed testimony about Victor's operation, including how you helped him target other wealthy women. Your social connections were valuable to him, weren't they?" Linda's carefully maintained facade cracked. "He'll destroy me." "No," Harriet corrected. "You destroyed yourself. Henry's offering you a chance to survive. I suggest you take it." The intercom buzzed. "Mrs. Carter's son is here." Andrew entered the office, laptop under his arm. His gray-green eyes, so like his father's, met Linda's without emotion. "The files you asked for, Ms. Nelson." He placed a USB drive on her desk. Complete records of the offshore accounts, including Mom's digital fingerprints on the transfers. Linda stared at her son, seeing Henry's ruthless efficiency in his movements. "Andrew, please, save it." His voice could have frozen flames. "Dad wanted to make sure you understood exactly what you're agreeing to." He opened the laptop, turning it to face her. "This is what happens if you refuse the deal." Linda watched in horror as her entire life unraveled on screen. Bank records showing her complicity in Victor's schemes, emails proving she had helped him target other women, security footage from their meetings, carefully edited to paint the most damning picture possible. "How long?" she whispered. "I started tracking you the day you first met him," Andrew replied. "Dad taught me to always watch for threats to the family, even from within." Harriet placed a final document before Linda. "Sign here. Initial each page. When you're done, you'll receive instructions regarding your new employment and living arrangements." "New employment?" "A receptionist position in Lakefield," Harriet said, offering no sympathy. "The monthly restitution payments will ensure you remember the cost of betrayal for a very long time." Linda picked up the pen, her hand trembling. Each signature felt like another nail in the coffin of her old life. "The Stratford Coast house," she asked quietly. "Returned to its rightful owner," Andrew answered, "along with everything else you tried to steal." As Linda signed the final page, Harriet pressed the intercom. "Send in the notary." In his Evergreen Securities office, Henry Carter watched the scene unfold through the secure video feed. Linda's complete surrender, Andrew's cold efficiency, Harriet's professional brutality. The pieces had fallen perfectly into place. Victor eliminated by his own criminal connections, Linda reduced to nothing, their entire network of conspirators exposed and destroyed. His phone buzzed. A text from Detective Green. Case closed. Mob hit, officially. Henry smiled. Even the cleanup had gone according to plan. Some would call it overkill, but Henry Carter hadn't built his empire by showing mercy to those who betrayed him, and he certainly hadn't raised his son to be weak. The predator had caught his prey. The message was clear: cross the Carter family, and destruction would be total. 1 year later, Henry Carter's corner office at Evergreen Securities hummed with quiet power. He studied the quarterly reports with satisfaction. The company hadn't just survived the attempted coup, it had emerged stronger, its reputation for weathering storms only enhanced. "The McAllister merger numbers," Paula said, placing a thick folder on his desk. "We're exceeding projections by 20%. "Good," Henry noted her fully recovered mobility. Traces of the car accident erased. The board meeting. Scheduled for 2, though there's something else you should see first. Paula activated the secure screen on his wall. Andrew's latest project at MIT. The screen filled with complex code. A new security system that would revolutionize digital banking. At 16, Andrew had already earned early admission and a full scholarship. More importantly, he'd proven himself worthy of the Carter legacy. "The patent applications?" Henry asked. "Filed last week." Paula's smile held genuine pride. "He's already received offers from 3 major tech firms." Henry's phone buzzed. A text from Martin Green. Monthly surveillance report on L. Still working reception at the medical office. No violations of the agreement. Another message. Emmy's used the money well. Started a successful real estate agency in Redwood City, far from her ex-husband's hunting grounds. Meredith Hall's evidence had helped seal Victor's fate, and Henry believed in rewarding loyalty. The anonymous donation that helped her rebuild her life was just good business. "Sir," Paula interrupted his thoughts. "Harriet Nelson's here." Harriet entered, impeccably dressed as always. "Quarterly compliance review," she announced, placing a tablet on his desk. "Everything's clean. The SEC investigation is officially closed. All traces of Harrison's corruption buried in bureaucratic hell where they belong. And our other matter. The last of Victor's victims received their settlement payments. His previous hunting grounds are scorched earth now. No one will ever know the full extent of his operations." She paused. "Or how they really ended." Henry nodded in approval. The official story, a mob hit over gambling debts, had held firm. Even Detective Green's final report supported the narrative, though her eyes had told a different story. "The Stratford Coast property?" Harriet asked. "Transferred back to my name," Henry confirmed. "All fraud investigations closed. The social circle that abandoned Linda, desperate to prove loyalty now." Paula nodded. "And the charity boards?" "Completely restructured," Harriet said. "The new directors understand the importance of proper oversight and proper gratitude." Henry turned to the window, surveying his domain. Eastbridge spread before him, its towers reaching toward the sky, each building holding stories of power and betrayal, of predators and prey. He'd chosen his role long ago in Fenway's unforgiving streets. Linda and Victor had mistaken his civilized veneer for weakness. Their final mistake. "Paula," he called, "clear my schedule for tonight. Family dinner." 10 years later, the top floor of Carter Tower dominated Eastbridge's financial district, its sleek glass and steel design a testament to power and progress. Andrew Carter stood at his father's old desk, now his own, reviewing the latest acquisition reports. At 26, he'd already surpassed most of his peers, transforming Evergreen Securities into a global powerhouse. "The Palmyra merger is complete," his assistant announced through the intercom, "and your father's jet just landed." Andrew checked his watch, a gift from Henry on the day he took over as CEO. "Schedule the board meeting for tomorrow," he said. "And Sarah, make sure the secure files are ready." Henry Carter's retirement from active management hadn't diminished his influence. If anything, stepping back had only made him more dangerous, operating in the shadows with the same ruthless efficiency he'd shown a decade ago. The elevator doors opened silently. Henry entered, his hair now silver, but his eyes as sharp as ever. "The Jade Isle situation handled?" he asked. Andrew nodded, bringing up data on his screens. "Their attempt to block our expansion was discouraged." Henry smiled. "Their regulatory chairman received proof of his connections to certain shady groups. He resigned this morning. His replacement understands the benefits of cooperation." Andrew opened another window on the monitor. "We just closed the Redwood City real estate deal. Meredith Hall's company is thriving. She sent her thanks." Henry nodded in approval. "Always reward loyalty." Andrew shifted in his seat. "Linda's still making restitution payments?" Henry's expression remained neutral. "Yes, still at the receptionist desk in Lakefield. She asked about you." Andrew's face was unreadable. "I don't read her letters." Henry understood. Detective Green retired last month. The official file on Victor remains closed. Andrew turned back to the monitor, scanning the day's market data. Theo Vigil's son reached out, wants to discuss expanding their operations. Henry raised an eyebrow. They'd never found proof about Victor's death, though they appreciated our assistance in locating him. Andrew nodded. "We'll handle it carefully." Father and son stood at the window, looking out over the city they controlled. The world had changed, but the fundamental truth remained: predator or prey. No middle ground. "Join me for dinner," Henry offered. "That little Italian place in the village. The one where you first learned about leverage." Andrew smiled at the memory. "The waiter who tried to blackmail his manager. My first practical lesson in handling threats." Henry checked his phone. "They're still in business, thanks to our intervention. Loyalty should be rewarded." They headed toward the elevator, conversation turning to lighter matters: investments, acquisitions, the occasional necessary destruction of those who opposed them. Far below, Linda Carter prepared for another day at the reception desk, each shift reminding her of the price she continued to pay. In Redwood City, Meredith Hall oversaw property listings worth millions, never speaking of Victor or how he died. Detective Emily Green enjoyed retirement, content to avoid certain questions about old cases. Meanwhile, in the gleaming towers of Eastbridge, the Carter men reigned. Henry's silver hair and Andrew's technological empire marked the only changes time had brought. Their core nature, predatory, ruthless, unforgiving, remained eternal. Power was their currency. The methods might change, Andrew's digital empire complementing Henry's old-school power plays. But the truth stayed the same. They were apex predators, always had been, always would be. They raised their glasses in their traditional toast. "To family," Henry began. "To power," Andrew completed. The cycle continued. The strong ruled, the weak served, and those foolish enough to threaten the Carter family learned the same lesson Linda and Victor had discovered a decade ago. Some powers are best left unchallenged. Some predators are best left unhunted. And some betrayals demand a price that never stops being paid. The Carter legacy endured, in boardrooms and back alleys, in legal documents and encrypted files. Their influence shaped the world, and any who dared to threaten it learned the brutal lesson that had defined their rise from Fenway streets. In this world, you're either the predator or the prey. The Carters had made their choice long ago. They were apex predators, and they always would be. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.